Congratulations, you got your win condition. Or at least I hope you do. There are some games where you don't actually got a key card to make a build around. Sometimes you're just playing off pure tempo and trying to do well from there. Previously, we've been putting everything into turns. Now that you're in top 5 or top 6 in your games, rather than guidelines for each turn, I'm going to be talking about what you should generally be doing once you're at the top 5 or top 6. We're going to break down this video into two parts, the late game and the end game. So let's start with the former. Normally in this time, you're one of four things. You're either about to die, you're tempo heavy, you're still finding your pieces, or you got everything you wanted. If you're about to be dead, that means you didn't find any direction or you found it too late, and there's nothing right now to save you from imminent death. It happens. You can't win every game. There will be games where your opponents high roll uncontrollably, or games where you just don't find anything going for you. But always think about why this happened. Maybe something in the early game decisions started a domino effect to why you lost. Perhaps you didn't build your composition properly, or you didn't do the best strategy for your hero. Don't take it personally and just move on. The more you tilt, the worse you play as you keep going. But always try to learn from your mistakes. Sometimes you're in a weird situation where you're actually beating people, but you're starting to see the limits to your build. If you got a full tempo build that revolves around one big minion, then there's a good chance you won't beat somebody who has a fully made endgame build. You may be able to destroy those who are on the way to the endgame builds, but that would be your limit. What you need to do is find a way to lose the least amount of MMR as possible, and at least land top 4. Normally you can do this by getting poison cards, at least against builds with big stats. But always look out for the tech cards or counter cards for the other builds. There's also an option of transitioning, as we discussed in the last video. If you can switch to a new build that is stronger than your current one, work towards it and perhaps you can get first place. There's not really much to say here, you're just looking for your key cards to complete your build. You do gotta make sure you're using your gold efficiently still. Rolling endlessly and being -10 isn't ideal, so even if you can't find the exact card you need, many builds are flexible. Sometimes you just gotta pick up a Savannah Highmane instead of a Rat Pack to finish off your Leapfrogger build, for example. Just be sure to keep your eyes wide and double check every card on the shop for the ideal or an alternative. Awesome, you're high rolling, you got the endgame build, so all you need to do now is scale even harder or get some tech cards. When it comes to tech cards, you gotta watch out to what your opponents are doing. There are various tech cards that will secure you the first place, but you gotta be sure to buy them preemptively. Do keep in mind, one of the toughest parts about finishing your build is getting board locked. There should always be 1 or 2 minions you're willing to sell if you need a tech card or just another card to finish off your build. A medium-sized minion is nice, but you may benefit more for a card that counters their entire build. There's one aspect of the late game you also gotta be sure of to make sure you secure the win. We discussed one of them and it was tech cards, but you also have to make sure you're scouting your lobby. Tech cards and countering. Make sure you know the tech cards, there is plenty of them. For example, Zapp counters against builds that use Titus, but also certain Deathrattle effects like Nadina, Leeroy, Rat Pack, or Kangor's Apprentice. Tunnel Blaster is great at countering Divine Shield builds, Undeads, and Beasts. You can pop the opponent's Divine Shield to remove half their strength, but also destroy low health Deathrattles and Reborns before they can do real damage. Uther the Lightbringer, however, helps with those kind of counters. So you can tech against their tech by using Uther. Alternatively, use Uther to help buff magnetic units or minions in the shop for your Felbat build. Sindori's Straight Shot not only removes Reborns, cards that you normally see in Undead or Beast builds, but they also remove taunts. While this does not sound like much, it means your minions will avoid any taunted minions with powerful stats or poison. You can also use this card to set up any cleave attacks you may have. Glowscale and Selfless Hero is an extraordinary way to deal against high stat builds or poison builds. Not only does it defend against poison, but it also makes your poison minions twice as strong. If you're in a never-ending tie against poison builds, be sure to look out for these cards. Mantid Queen and Leeroy are cards that will help you deal against minions with big stats. Mantid Queen can RNG win you the game by getting Divine Shield. Meanwhile, Leeroy absolutely destroys any big stat minions with Divine Shield. Keep this in mind whenever you're a couple minions weak to deal with your opponent's scaling. There will be times when you need to deal with minions with multiple Divine Shield, Deathrattles, or other key minions. If you can get a Foe Reaper or Cave Hydra, and you can give it decent stats either through Uther or other spells, they can help you against a lot of other builds. Wave Rider is also a great card to synergize with their abilities. Replicating Menace and Ghastcoiler are cards I love to pick up if I'm ever in a fight against an opponent that has equal stats than I do. If I got ball of minions with poison, Replicating Menace's Deathrattle effect can be the deciding factor to me winning. Meanwhile, Ghastcoiler can handle low stat poisons or even pull out a surprise Leeroy. If 6 of your minions destroy 6 of theirs, Ghastcoiler is a good way to end your build to deal with any remaining minions they may have. However, it's less effective if they got a bunch of stats on everybody. Voidlord, Risin Rider, and Annoya Module are good cards if you need sticky taunts to deal with your opponent's builds. If they start the fight with a Deathrattle minion and it has no taunt, then these cards can really mess them up. Other times, they're just good protectors for builds that need to redirect attacks away from their key cards. Sparring Partner and Vigilant Stoneborn have the same deal as the above taunts, but remember you can give them to Leeroy or Mantid Queen. If they start to fight with a big minion, then it's game over for them. Certain builds can kind of counter other builds. It's almost like a rock, paper, scissors kind of deal. Small poisons beat big stat builds. Big stat builds can beat Deathrattles or Divine Shield builds, while Deathrattle builds and Divine Shield builds can beat Poison Scam. Of course, there's plenty of exceptions, but let's do a quick overview on this. So, Poison beats big stats. It's why Elementals without Crackling Cyclone fear Poison Murlocs. A Divine Shield Poison 5/5 ball of stats is going to destroy 2 of your opponent's triple-digit minions. This is why if you got a weak build, you can always try to find Leeroy or Mantid Queen to stop your opponent's minions. Just be sure that they have a decent amount of health so they don't get destroyed by indirect damage from Tunnel Blaster or Soul Juggler. Traditional Deathrattle minions from tribes like Demon and Beast, or traditional Divine Shield builds like Mechs or Dragons without high scaling, they will lose to a build that has minions with over 200 stats. Demons, Beasts, Mechs, and Dragons don't really have that much scaling to get numbers that high. Keep this in mind when scaling out your opponents. If you can beat them by just having big stats, then you can think ahead and figure out how to beat your other opponents. Be sure to look out for tech cards just so you can completely destroy them. By the way, this doesn't really apply to undeads or leapfrogger beasts. Their scaling can actually get pretty obscene. They can get strong enough to defeat the average high stat builds. I think I said this multiple times already, but it begs repeating. If you're fighting a low stat poison scam build like mediocre stat Murlocs, Leeroy, and Mantid Queen, then get a reborn Ghastcoiler. It will spread out enough minions to deal with their low health. It's why tribes like Mechs, Beasts, and Undeads can fare very well against Murlocs that don't have Brand Bronzebeard. If they don't got obscenely high stats, then they can deal with multiple minions or Divine Shields. A breakdown of late game wouldn't be completed without mentioning your health total. Your health total can really dictate what your next set of plays can be. If you're in a situation where you're heavy tempo, but without a real win condition, then power leveling may be your best bet. Remember, the 15 damage cap is still intact once it's past turn 8 and after an enemy gets destroyed. Your health is a resource, and it doesn't matter if you win at 1 health or win at 40 health. Unless you're going for an achievement, it's best to use your health as a way to take risks. There's risks such as upgrading to a higher level, going for extra scaling, or get extra value from revenge cards. You always have to find a way to use your gold the most efficiently, even if it means taking a hit or two. It's something you can't really do when you have low health. What you can do with low health is fight a ghost. This will give you a breath of fresh air, and depending on how weak your opponent is, you can do some greedy plays like you would if you had a lot of health. Endgame, the final fights. This is the rarest stage of the game that many players do not have much experience in. Endgame is when you or 1 or 2 other players are fighting each other into constant ties or small hits. Usually it's when you're still alive around turn 15. Sometimes it's a matter of rock, paper, scissors. You may beat one opponent's composition while the other player beats you. Sometimes it's just up to luck and the person who gets ghost gets a better advantage. If it's between you and one other player, and you're both stuck in a tie or you do not deal enough damage to destroy them in one turn, then it's time to start picking up counters. Decide whether or not you need to scale anymore or you need to get a counter card. This is why we constantly scout and think ahead. Preemptively buying counter cards will help prepare you well against your opponents. Even if you're in a weaker position, buying cards that help against the enemy can give you a slight edge. A 1% chance to win is still a better chance than 0. That about wraps up the stages of the game. Not all guidelines are set in stone, and there will be some exceptions. It depends on your heroes and the cards in the game, but the idea and the intent will always remain. Early game, you have to think about your leveling curve and why you're doing it. Mid game, you have to make good decisions on how to spend your gold to get ahead. Late game, you have to create a proper build to gain the most MMR. End game, you gotta edge out the win with any way you can. Remember, you gotta put it all into practice. For as much as I keep telling you on how to improve, it does not replace real experience. Keep playing, keep practicing these guidelines, make it a habit, and you should see yourself winning more often. Thank you all for watching. Please give the video a like and subscribe to my channel. If you're interested in coaching, just for $12 an hour, I can coach you on anything you need to know about Battlegrounds through Metafy or WeCoach. And also, if you like my videos, please consider donating to my Ko-fi so I can keep making them. And if you want to know what I'm working on next, or just my thoughts on the current state of Battlegrounds, please follow my Twitter. See you all next time and hope to see you all climb.